The stranger on the train who changed her destiny. Chapter 1. The ticket she almost threw away. Maya Bennett had always believed some journeys were planned long before we knew we were taking them. That evening, standing under the dripping station roof with a suitcase in one hand and an envelope in the other, she wished she'd never boarded the train at all. The rain had started just before 6, turning the streets into long mirrors of blurred headlights. Inside the envelope was everything left of her old life. A resignation letter signed in a trembling hand, a curled photograph, and a ticket to a city where she knew absolutely no one. Her job had vanished when the marketing firm she'd given 4 years to collapsed overnight. Her lease, tied to a salary that no longer existed, was ending. And 6 weeks earlier, her fiancé Daniel had called off their wedding, standing in their kitchen with his hands in his pockets, unable to meet her eyes. Worse than any single loss was the quieter discovery underneath it all, that the future she'd spent years building had never really belonged to her. It had belonged to Daniel. His perfect house, his family's guest list, his particular vision of a wife who complemented a life she'd never actually chosen. Maya had only ever wanted to feel alive. She stepped onto the train seconds before the doors closed and found a window seat, rain still clinging to her coat. "Running away?" a voice asked. She turned. A man sat across the narrow aisle, dark hair, a charcoal coat, a worn leather watch. His eyes were unsettlingly calm, as though he already knew her. "Excuse me?" "I asked if you're running away. That's rather rude." "Probably," he said, entirely unbothered, and turned back to the window. She couldn't stop glancing at him. Something about his face felt maddeningly familiar. "Have we met before?" "No." The answer came a half-second too fast. Her phone buzzed. A message from Daniel. "You can't keep blaming me for everything. Come home." She deleted it. "Bad news?" the stranger asked. "Old news." Sometimes old news is the hardest kind to forget. The train plunged into a tunnel. When the lights flickered back on, he'd set a small silver key on the table between them. "What's that?" "Something that belongs to you. You don't even know me." "I know more about you than you think." He stood, buttoning his coat. "Don't lose it. Tomorrow morning, someone is going to ask you to make a decision." "What decision?" "My stop," he said. But no station appeared outside the window, only unbroken darkness. When Maya looked back, he was gone. No open door, no footsteps, nothing to explain it, only the key on the table, and beside it, a note folded into a precise square. 7 words in a tight, slanted hand. "Don't marry Daniel. Trust the woman in blue." There was no wedding left to stop, but sitting alone in that half-empty carriage, Maya understood one thing with absolute certainty. The stranger hadn't boarded that train by accident. Chapter 2. The Woman in Blue. Maya barely slept. The stranger's words looped behind her closed eyes all night. Don't marry Daniel, already accomplished by Daniel himself, and the stranger part. Trust the woman in blue, offering no context at all. By 7 the next morning, she sat in a small cafe across from the central station, the silver key, engraved with a single number, 17, turning over and over between her fingers. She told herself she was simply having breakfast before continuing her journey. She didn't quite believe it. At 7:40, a woman entered wearing a blue coat, a blue scarf wound twice around her throat, and a blue handbag held close against her side. She scanned the room once and walked straight to Maya's table. "Are you Maya Bennett?" "Who are you?" "My name is Eleanor." She sat without waiting for an invitation. "Your mother asked me to find you." "My mother died 12 years ago." "I know. Then why would she be asking anyone to find me?" Eleanor opened a slim folder and slid an old photograph across the table. Maya recognized her mother instantly, standing beside a man Maya had never seen, a small dark-haired boy held between them. "Who is that?" "That," Eleanor said, "is the reason the stranger on the train found you." "How do you know about him?" Eleanor didn't answer. "Your mother left you something, a choice." The bell above the door chimed. A man in a black coat entered and looked directly at Eleanor. Her careful composure vanished instantly, replaced by something sharper. "We have to go," she said, already pulling Maya up by the wrist. "Why?" "Because they found us." Chapter 3. The Key to Room 17. Eleanor moved through the station with practiced urgency, leading Maya down an unmarked staircase near the far end of the platforms into a narrow service corridor that smelled of dust and old brick. It opened unexpectedly into the ground floor of a forgotten hotel, absorbed long ago into the station's sprawl. At the end of the hall, a door read, in faded brass numerals, 17. The silver key turned in the lock as though it had been waiting specifically for this morning. Inside, dust covered an old desk and a locked, iron-banded wooden box. Above the desk, dozens of photographs of Maya's mother had been pinned in overlapping rows, never alone, always beside the same dark-haired man. "Who is he?" "His name was Thomas," Eleanor said quietly. "He disappeared 17 years ago." In the smallest photograph, tucked in the corner, Maya's mother cradled an infant. On the back, in her unmistakable looping hand, "For Maya, when she is ready to know the truth." Eleanor opened the wooden box with a second, smaller key, revealing a sealed envelope addressed to Maya. Inside, her mother's letter began, "My darling Maya, if you're reading this, the past has finally caught up with us." It spoke of trusting someone completely, of a trust that had cost nearly everything, and it ended with a line Maya couldn't fully parse. "The person you fear is not the person you should fear." Who was my mother afraid of? Your father's family. My father didn't die, Maya. Silence filled the dusty room. Then where is he? Eleanor glanced toward the door. That's exactly what we've spent 17 years trying to find out. Chapter 4. The Stranger Returns. That evening, Maya spotted him again, the stranger from the train, standing beneath a street lamp across the road, unmoving while the evening crowd flowed past him on both sides. She didn't stop to think. "You owe me answers," she said, crossing the wet pavement toward him. "You're not imagining things," he said simply. "Who are you?" "My name is Adrian." "Why did you choose me, out of everyone on that train? Why me?" "Because your mother chose you," he said, "a long time before I did." He glanced toward the dark shape of the old station down the street. "Your family hid something there 20 years ago? Something important enough that people are still looking for it?" "What?" "The truth about your father, about what really happened to him. And why do you care so much? You're a stranger." Something shifted behind his calm expression, old, carefully managed grief. "Because your father saved my life," he said, "a long time ago when I was too young to understand what that meant." Maya stood in the buzzing streetlight, feeling the last of her old assumptions rearrange themselves. The stranger on the train wasn't a stranger at all. Whatever else he was tied to the exact history her mother had spent 12 years of silence trying to protect her from. Chapter 5. The Man Who Disappeared. Back at the guest house, with Eleanor summoned to join them, Adrian finally explained. Maya's father, Thomas Bennett, had been a railway engineer who'd stumbled onto evidence of corruption running through several powerful families, falsified inspections, bribes, an accident cover-up that had quietly cost lives. Before he could expose it, he vanished. Maya's mother had spent years blamed for helping him escape, a story Adrian had never believed. "He left something for you," Adrian said, producing a battered cassette recorder. Static filled the room, then her father's voice, steady and unfamiliar. "If Maya ever hears this, I need her to understand one thing. Never trust anyone who tells you the truth is simple." Then silence. 2 days later, against every instinct, Maya returned to her old apartment. Daniel opened the door, already rehearsing an apology. "Do you know a man named Thomas Bennett?" she asked, before he could finish. Daniel went pale. That was answer enough. "My father mentioned him," he admitted finally. "Years ago, before I even knew you." "You knew the name well enough that it stopped your heart just now." He said nothing, which told her everything. Their broken engagement, Maya finally understood, had never really been about seating charts or wedding venues. It had been shaped by a secret Daniel's family had carried far longer than their relationship had existed. Chapter 6. The Old Station. That night, the three of them returned to the station, moving through its dim halls long after the last trains had emptied. Adrian led Maya to a disused control room hidden behind an unmarked door near the old signal tower. Behind a locked panel, wrapped in oilcloth, was a leather-bound journal, her father's handwriting filling page after page. Names, dates, payments, meetings, documented with careful, methodical precision. Near the final pages, in hurried script, one entry made Maya's breath catch. If they come for Maya, Adrian must protect her. "You knew," she said. "Not everything. I didn't find this journal until years after he disappeared." "You knew he trusted you? With me?" "Yes." "Then why the riddles? The notes, the disappearing act on the train?" "Because I promised him I wouldn't tell you directly," Adrian said. "He believed some truths only mean something if you fight your own way toward them." Maya's anger flared, familiar and exhausted. The same anger she'd carried toward her mother's silence for 12 years, now redirected. But beneath it, watching Adrian's face in the dim room, she saw a burden far older and heavier than she'd first understood. Chapter 7. The night everything changed. 2 nights later, Maya returned home to find her front door hanging open. Nothing had been stolen except the photograph Eleanor had first shown her. Adrian arrived within 20 minutes, checking windows and door frames with practiced attention. "They're looking for the journal," he said. "The people your father exposed. Some are still alive, and very good at staying that way." "How did they even know where I lived?" Adrian hesitated. "Because someone helping us has also been talking to them." Eleanor vanished the following day. Adrian recovered encrypted messages suggesting betrayal, and Maya's stomach turned, until Eleanor returned that night, her blue coat torn at the shoulder, and confessed everything. "I never wanted to hurt your mother," she said. Years earlier, the same people had threatened Maya's life as a child, unless Eleanor reported on her mother's movements. "There was no version of this where I got to be simply good." Maya sat with that for a long moment. Everyone in her life, it seemed, had been protecting her in their own imperfect way. But no one, in 17 years, had trusted her enough to simply tell her the truth. Chapter 8. The Secret in the Photograph. Studying a second copy of The Photograph, Maya noticed a building in the background, a tall structure with an ornate clock face. "The old railway headquarters," Adrian said, going still. They went that night, moving through streets slick with rain until the abandoned building rose ahead of them. Inside, behind the frozen clock mechanism, was a second hidden compartment, and a letter addressed not to Maya, but to Adrian. Thomas had written, "When Maya comes looking for answers, don't give her the truth. Give her the choice to discover it herself." Adrian stared at the frozen clock face above them. "I always thought he was asking me to protect you from the truth," he said slowly. "That's not what he wanted at all. He was asking me to help you become strong enough to survive it once you found it yourself." Chapter 9. The Father. A week of careful searching led Maya to a small house 3 hours away, where Thomas Bennett had lived under another name for 17 years. The reunion wasn't what she'd imagined. She didn't run into his arms. She stood in the doorway of a stranger's living room, unable to move under the weight of too many unanswered questions. "Why did you leave me?" she finally asked. "Staying would have gotten you killed. Both of you. You should have told me. You protected me from the truth, Dad, not from the people who actually caused it." Thomas began to cry. Not composed tears, but something raw. 17 years finally breaking open. And watching him, Maya realized she wasn't looking at the mysterious missing figure of her imagination. She was looking at a frightened man who had spent nearly 2 decades regretting a single, impossible decision. Chapter 10. What her mother really did. Over several visits, Thomas told her the fuller truth. Her mother hadn't betrayed him. She had sacrificed her own reputation deliberately to protect them both, letting an entire town believe Thomas had simply abandoned his family, rather than risk leading their pursuers back to him. She'd spent the rest of her life waiting, dying 12 years later, with unsent letters still addressed to a husband she never stopped believing would return. Maya cried harder hearing this than at any other point in the unraveling week. Later, at the clock tower, Adrian finally told her the rest of his own story. As a teenager, Thomas had pulled him out of a dangerous situation involving the same corrupt network, saving his life. His promise to protect Maya had started as a debt. But somewhere along the way, Adrian admitted, it stopped being only a promise. "I fell in love with you." Maya didn't know what to say. Her whole life had been quietly built around people leaving. She'd never considered someone who, in his own careful way, had been staying all along. "I don't know how to trust something that started as an obligation," she said finally. "I'm not asking you to decide tonight," Adrian said. "I just didn't want to keep carrying it in silence anymore." Chapter 11. The Last Envelope. Thomas gave Maya one final envelope, a letter from her mother, entrusted to him years earlier for exactly this moment. "My daughter," it read, "I hope you can forgive the silence. It was never meant as a wall between us. It was meant as a shield, however imperfect, and I am sorry it so often felt like the former instead." Its final line stayed with Maya for the rest of her life. "Destiny isn't something that happens to you. It is what you choose after life breaks the plans you made." The train, she finally understood, hadn't changed her destiny at all. It had simply given her the courage, at exactly the moment she needed it, to change it herself. Chapter 12. The Final Threat and the Choice. The people responsible for Thomas's disappearance resurfaced with new urgency, wanting the journal destroyed. A car followed Maya's taxi. Someone searched Adrian's apartment. Eleanor received a call that left her hands shaking for an hour. Maya refused to hand it over. For the first time, she wasn't running. Working with Adrian and Eleanor, she compiled everything: journal, recording, photographs, letters, and delivered it to a journalist and a set of investigators Eleanor trusted. The story went public within a month. Powerful families who'd hidden behind wealth and influence, including Daniel's father, were finally exposed. Thomas was no longer a missing man whispered about unkindly. Maya's mother was no longer blamed for a betrayal that had never been hers. Weeks later, Adrian was offered a position overseas, a life finally free of the promise that had shaped it for 17 years. Maya braced for him to leave, the old fear rising automatically. Instead, he asked, "Do you want me to go?" "I want you to choose," she said. "Not because of a promise to my father, because it's actually what you want." He took her hand. "I choose you. You stopped being a promise I was keeping, and became someone I can't imagine my life without." Chapter 13. The Stranger Who Changed Her Destiny. Months later, Maya boarded the Riverside Express again. Same platform, same window seat, chosen deliberately this time instead of fled onto. She carried no suitcase full of everything she was escaping, only a notebook already filling with plans. A book about everything that had happened, a foundation in her mother's name, a life built on purpose rather than survival. "You still believe strangers can change someone's destiny?" Adrian asked. "No," Maya said. "I believe we change our own. Strangers can hand us a key or leave a note on a table. Walking through the door has always been ours." Before the train reached its next stop, she made one final detour. Back to room 17, now the reading room of a small community library she'd helped fund. She left one last letter, not for Adrian or her parents, but for the woman she'd been the night she first boarded that train. "You thought your life was ending. It wasn't. You thought the future had already been decided. It hadn't. You just hadn't found the door yet." A year later, 2 photographs hung on the library wall, her father finally unguarded, and her mother, laughing at something just outside the frame. Beneath them, a small brass plaque read, "Sometimes the person who changes your life arrives disguised as a stranger." Maya stood before them a long moment before Adrian found her, as he always did. "Ready?" She nodded, and they walked back to the platform together, where a train was already waiting. Adrian hadn't saved her. The train hadn't saved her. The silver key hadn't saved her. They had simply opened doors, one after another. Maya had been the one brave enough to walk through them. She took his hand, and together they boarded the train. Because sometimes destiny doesn't arrive with any warning at all. Sometimes it simply sits quietly across from you, waiting to see if you're brave enough to notice it. Sometimes it says only 7 words. And sometimes, if you're willing to listen, those 7 words change everything. Don't be afraid to choose again. The end.